Okay. Um, all right, I'll go ahead and get started, but I'm gonna have to pay attention to this participant list, make sure we've got people trying to wait in the waiting room. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosalie Rossi, and I'm the program manager for GRIID-C. GRIID-C is the data repository that you will be using to share your data and make it publicly available so others can use it in the future. So today I'll go ahead and get started talking about what our goals for today are going to be. We're going to understand what exactly GRIID-C is, what we do, just some really basic concepts for organizing your data, which will help you later on when you want to submit your data. Learn how to request an account with us, which is the first step. Learn how and when to submit a dataset information form, which you may have heard about, and then learn how to actually submit your data to our repository. So GRIID-C is a data repository. We're multidisciplinary. We started after the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill in response to that to house GOMRI, Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative data. It was a 10-year program. This was established in 2011. We are housed at the Hart Research Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. And we are a team of software developers who develop and maintain the site. We respond to user needs. We are always trying to improve our system. And then we also have a team of data curators who actually look at the data. So you're not just submitting data and we accept it blindly. We take a look at it, and I'll go a little bit more into detail about what we actually look for. And then we archive and disseminate this data to the research community. So just some benefits. We like to start with this because we know that this is one extra step you have to do. However, it is beneficial to you as well. So you get a DOI for your data set. As soon as you submit your data to us, you get a digital object identifier that you can use in future publications or someone else can use if they use your data, and you get cited and credit for it. We also offer help with data management planning, and I know that more and more funders are requiring that data management plans be submitted, and we can help with that. We like to start from the beginning of the data submission process with actually helping you plan for this. We collect really detailed metadata for your data. So you'll provide it to us and we'll make sure that it's in good shape so that someone can actually use the data. And then, of course, with our search page on our system, we make sure that it's searchable. This also, is another benefit of the DOI. And we are a member node with Data One. So your data set metadata is even more out there in the world to be searched and found. And like I mentioned earlier, we curate the data. So we make sure it's in good shape to be shared. And we can also link the data sets to publications. And I always want to remind other researchers that have been funded multiple times with the MBRACE program that this is something we do offer. So if you publish on your data, let us know, and we can link the two together. We can provide the publication URL on the datasets landing page. So it's just kind of another connection between the two. And our mission is to ensure a data and information legacy that promotes continual scientific discovery and public awareness of the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem. And so since we started with GOMRI, the program is over. And of course, now we have data from other groups, including you, and other centers of excellence programs, the Texas Center of Excellence, the Florida Center of Excellence. Because we're based out of the Hart Research Institute, we are receiving Hart Research Institute data. We also have some NOAA-funded projects in our system, Red Snapper count, and we'll be getting the Amberjack count coming soon. And then we also have the National Academy of Sciences Gulf Research Program data. So because we started as a response to a disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, and they wanted to learn all the effects of this, we do have a wide variety of data, and we think of it as a good thing if there's a data-specific repository out there that doesn't accept a data type. We typically do. So we have data ranging from biological, modeling, oceanographic, social science, health, genetics, climatology, all different types of data. So that was just a little background about our program. We'll go into just some basic concepts for organizing data. And I apologize if this sounds really basic, but this is honestly something we run into constantly when we are curating the data. So we just like to go over it as a quick little refresher. So why should you should keep yourself organized. Organizing this at the beginning of collecting the data is only going to help you later on when you're trying to submit the data to us. You can track the different processes that you do, version control, and this stems just from the beginning of naming a file. How do you properly name your files? Are you just saying 1, 2, 3, using better things like dates, and instead of final, which we all do, this can all help later on in the process. And of course, this helps avoid data loss. If you can't understand what your file name meant or what that column of data meant, how is another user going to understand it? And then, of course, this just in general enables sharing it later on. And so if a postdoc was going to use this, would they be able to understand it? Or just someone in the future when they download your data set? So we just like to remind everyone that the first thing you should think about is data backup. We've had so many instances of data loss, and it will continue to happen, but we just like to throw this out there that it's the first thing you should kind of think about when you're doing this. Data should be backed up beyond an external hard drive. Sorry, they do fail, they get lost. And they should be automated, scheduled, and tested. And you want to also make sure every now and again you can get in there, open up the file, and that it's still in the format that you want it to be. And ideally, it should be in multiple locations. So say you have a copy, say 3, copy on your computer, an external hard drive, and then an automated backup from your institutional server. And I assume that institutional servers are happening these days. Back when we started this training, I don't think it really was a big thing. But in case it's not, just contact your IT department just in case and see what their schedule is. Maybe it's not being backed up enough or as much as you'd like. And then, as I mentioned earlier about file names, I know this sounds really basic, but it's something to think about to keep yourself from getting confused. And then also when you share the data to us. So we prefer non-proprietary file types like text or CSV. We will accept Excel just because it's very commonly used, but we really are looking for those non-proprietary file types. And the names should be short and consistent and descriptive. We don't want any spaces in there. Sometimes you can't open files because of that. Long file names, sometimes the path is too long and you can't open the file because of that. So I just show a couple of examples of bill data 6, nobody is going to understand. Like I mentioned, final is never a good naming convention. But over here, this has a descriptive name, there's a date, they're consistent, there's no spaces. And then I also didn't think about this, but as I've been reviewing data sets and looking at the file names, it's also something when you're going to share it to us and someone downloads it later into the future and it's out there, you want it to be a name that means something so they understand it, but also it just doesn't sound very professional. Bill data or data for Rosalie to get to the GRIIDC site, things like that. It needs to kind of be more descriptive. Okay, so moving on to documentation. This is another really important thing to do. I think just from the start, if you're using a spreadsheet, the headers should be documented somewhere. It's a good idea to just copy and paste them into another sheet, and then you can keep a description list of each one so that it is consistent and you understand what the columns mean. So just some basic do's and don'ts: back up your data, be consistent, always be documenting as you're collecting. We want to save final data in non-proprietary formats. We know that sometimes you might be using proprietary to begin with, but in the end, it should be non-proprietary in general. We do have some exceptions. Use standards whenever possible. If you're using a table of information, not pasting a table, but you have one table of information in Excel, just put that in one sheet. Sometimes we'll have multiple kind of tables within, and then the columns don't line up and it's just kind of a mess. And so you want one column to equal one parameter in the spreadsheet. So some don'ts. Don't save your data all in one little external hard drive. Don't use the same code to mean different things. We prefer that you don't embed graphs or charts or formulas. If you have a formula in there, we will ask you to remove it. We just kind of want the raw data. And you can always just provide the formula for us somewhere else if you feel that is necessary. And don't use formatting to convey information. So here is a spreadsheet with some bad habits in here. So we have some column headers that don't have definitions. We don't know what these mean. Blank cells. This is something we will come back to you guys and ask if there are blank cells in the spreadsheet. So if you have blank cells, you're using that as an indicator that data weren't collected, just make a note of that in the metadata so we can explain that to a user and we know that the data aren't missing or something went wrong. So there's a graph embedded in the spreadsheet. The species Kano has no definition. We don't know what that means. And then there's a highlighted cell. What does that mean? And we understand that sometimes you do want to indicate a cell means something differently, but we have to think about all users. We have to think about, people that may not have access to the color. They might be colorblind. So we're trying to be, make sure that everyone can understand what's happening. So if you do want to indicate something special with the cell, you can write it down somewhere in the metadata or say that this, this word equals this was going on with this data cell. And then we don't want to include the units of measurement within the cell. So say if somebody was going to use this data later, how painful would it be for them to have to strip out the millimeters instead of just being able to copy the number? So when I talk about submitting your data, submitting a data set, we want to just confirm that everybody knows what a data set is. It's a group or collection of related information. It can contain multiple files. Our system accepts multiple files and folders. It does not include published materials. So do not include a publication copy in there. And data should be provided in the rawest format possible. So don't provide averages, but provide the numbers that were used to get the averages. And a data set ideally should be standalone. So this isn't perfect, but we want to make it as standalone as possible, meaning that a user would not need some other information to understand this data to possibly use it again. We know that publications contain way more information about methods, but we really don't want you to just say methods refer to this publication, because what if someone can't find your publication? What if you have a paywall with that publication? So at least provide a descriptive, somewhat descriptive methodology within the data package so they can kind of understand what's going on. So that's what we mean by standalone. And then when you're thinking about organizing it, we just want to think about it, and we'll talk about the diff, and this is what you kind of have to consider before submitting it to us. So compliance with your data sharing policy. So say you're not going to group together data from 2023 to 2028 because you need to submit that data before 2028. So that's just something to consider when packaging it up. A data set can only be associated with one project in our system. So say you were also funded by the National Academies of Sciences, you'd have to pick MBRACE or National Academies of Sciences. One data set information form that you create is going to equal one data set. And then if you have multiple data sets that are related, you can relate them using consistent titles, so CTD data, Gulf of Mexico, summer 2023, and then the next one, CTD data, Gulf of Mexico, summer 2024. And then also in the abstract, you can say the water quality data for this data set is located in this data set, and we can help you kind of make sure that those are connected somehow. So where to submit data? This is kind of a little, you're like, well, we were supposed to submit it to you. What are you talking about? But if your data are already somewhere in a national approved data repository that we will have to take a look at, such as National Centers for Environmental Information, say you have genetic information, it's at NCBI already, we will accept the link to that. You'll still provide us the metadata, but we'll accept the link. However, all data still need to be identified through our system. So you can't just send me an email saying, it's already here, I don't need to do anything. You'll still need to create the diff and then provide the URL to that repository later on. So the first step is requesting an account. I've already set up the new MBRACE 3 projects in our system, and I'll show you where you can kind of see that information on our site. But then I've entered mostly from what I've received via email, the researchers associated with this project, but of course I probably didn't get everybody. So I'm going to show you how to request an account if you don't already have one. So this is the first step in the submission workflow. And you'll see we have a menu bar, and over here on help, that'll be an account request. And I'll show you that when we get to our site. It'll ask you to provide an email address. If your email is not found, that means I just haven't entered you into our system yet, and just send me a quick email and I'll add you, and then you'll be able to request an account. Quite possibly a lot of you already have an account, but you can always put your email in here and see. So like I said, if you're not in our system, just email me and I'll add you. Also, I want to remind everybody about this feature. If you have a data manager for your project, so somebody that's kind of in charge of putting all the data together, and they want to receive emails that so-and-so submitted a diff, so-and-so submitted a data set, so you're kind of getting that information, you'll receive an email. And not everybody always wants this information, but if you do, I can designate a data manager that will receive those emails. So just let me know if that's something that your project wants. Okay, so now to the meat and potatoes of the webinar. How and when to submit a diff or dataset information form. And I apologize, I know acronyms are terrible, but this is just the first kind of step of submission. So we're going to create and submit a dataset information form. And Landry has informed me that these are due on August 31st. So coming up soon, but don't worry, these are very easy to do. People get intimidated by these. I don't understand why. They're very simple. They're plans of what you're going to collect. So I can help you after this webinar. If you still have questions about how you want to organize it, you can just shoot me an email and we can figure it out together, or schedule a separate meeting to kind of figure it out. So this is kind of the first planning step. So why is it important for you? Well, it's important for you so you can start thinking about how you're going to package these data sets to submit. And like I said, doing this early is always better than doing it later. And it helps you determine how you're just organizing this as a data set. We also say it starts a documentation spiral. This just means all this information you put in the diff, which isn't too much, will transfer over to the submission form. So you're not duplicating work. You'll see this again and you'll be able to edit it again. And then it's important for us so we can estimate our storage needs. If we see that somebody has terabytes of data, then we'll be contacting you to say, okay, let's talk about how best we get this in our system. And then just helps us allocate our resources, and also helps us and your program leads track what might be coming later, and we can follow up with that. So when you're preparing to submit a diff, you want to think about all the way from the top. What's your research question? What methods are you planning to use? And then what's the data that's going to come out of this project? So this is kind of a broad field and lab data that kind of encapsulates it all. So not everybody might have this, but just to kind of capture all the data that might be coming. We have a question: what are the human and ecological risks associated with industrial facilities? So you might have some methods of, you're going to get some fish samples. We're going to analyze PAHs of their fish tissue. We might determine prioritization index scores. We're going to look at hydrodynamic variables, and then there might be some modeling, which we have a lot of that data as well. So we have about 5 different data sets that could be produced from just this little example here. We have PAHs. So this is something that might take a little longer. You know, analysis in a lab generally takes some time. So if you have that field data already collected, you might as well package that together and get it submitted, and then work on the analysis of, you know, laboratory things and submit that later. So then we might have a CSV file of the index scores. say the hydrodynamic variables are already at NCEI, that could be a separate data set and you'd provide us with the URL there. We might have some maps, that would be a separate one, and then models, which would be a separate one, because typically these are a bit larger. And with that, we would want all the components of a model to be able to run it. And if you have model data, we can work with you to kind of best decide how to get it to us. And because it's a little trickier because it's larger, but we have terabytes of data in our system, so we're willing to accept it. So once again, just general guidance, field and lab can be separated. It doesn't mean they have to be, but they can be. Field data can be submitted by collection dates. So if you want to do a summer of data collection, another, by year, that's fine. But I also want to remind people to think about it for a user later. How would someone really want to use it? Would they want all the data in one big package and have to download it? Would they want it by year? So that's just also another kind of thing to consider. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the diff. So this is our homepage, and we're actually getting a new website, a new front end, and we're going to update our look. So look forward to that. We're hoping it'll make things a little more clear and easy to access. But you can see we have main things you can do: search, submit, and monitor data. We're going to jump into actually submitting the data, and that starts with the dataset information form. So like I said, this is a planning document. It can be changed later on. So once you submit it to us, if you need to make updates, you don't really even need to, because later when you submit the data, you can make the updates then. So you'll see there's an interactive form on the left side, and then on the right, there's a list of all the data sets in the project that you are associated with. So you're not just going to see your data sets, you're going to see everybody's in your projects. The green check means that this diff has already been submitted and approved by GRIIDC. If you see a little yellow triangle, that means that you submitted it to us, but we're still taking a look at it and hasn't been approved. And then you can see the one with a red X means this is something you've worked on, but you haven't submitted it. So if you're not ready to finish it, you can always save and continue later. So over here, you'll select the project title, and you'll only see a project title that you are associated with, which means what I have associated you with in our system. So if for some reason you're in here and you don't see your project, let me know. I can add you to that project and then it'll display. And then also you'll see any field that has an asterisk, of course, is required. And then there's information buttons that if you hover over will describe what the field means. So this is something that's new for those of you who have been with us for a couple funding cycles. We have added a funder field. So this can be a little bit more specific. So of course we know y'all are MBRACE, but if you have other funding sources, you can put them here as well. If they're not on the list already here, you can add them, and then we'll take a look at it and we'll add it to our, standardized list once I've kind of looked through it and made sure it's a valid funder. So next you'll provide a title, and this will be a descriptive title about your data set. So like I said, you may not know everything right now, but we know we're going to collect some, water quality data this summer. So we'll just put water quality data summer 2024, and then you can update it with more details later. You'll put the primary point of contact, and you can also put an additional point of contact. And then you'll just provide a very brief abstract. This is not about the entirety of your project. This is just what this data set is going to be. So water quality variables collected Mississippi Sound, this state, we did it this way, couple sentences of what you're planning on doing. Then you'll provide the field of study. So this is pretty straightforward. And then this is kind of the most important thing here is this data set size. So this will help us later. If it's kind of giant, we'll contact you, or we'll just know that it's coming down the pike. I'll make like a note in our system about it, that we can work with you later on how to get it. And then any parameters and units, if you already know what parameters and units, you can, put them here. If not, that's fine too. It's not required at this point. the methods for collecting it, if you're doing field or simulated or lab. And then here you'll provide an estimated data sampling period. This is required. However, like I said, it's an estimate. So just put the dates that you think you're going to be collecting the data in here. So this just gives us an idea later when we're taking a look at diffs that haven't had data submitted to them, and we'll say, oh, look, they said they were collecting it here. We'll just follow up and see if they did. And then next you can define your spatial extent. So it'll ask you if it's spatial or non-spatial. So if you're just doing laboratory work, you can select non-spatial and say, we're just doing lab measurements. There's no, field sampling, no spatial component to this, which is fine. And then if you do, you'll select spatial, and you can use this wizard to describe that. So at this point, you can either insert coordinate text or draw on the map, and you can use a box, polygon, line, or point, depending on what type of data that best represents. So at this point, you may not know the specific coordinates, which is completely fine. So you would just draw on the map, and we can just say, oh, we're going to generally collect it here. And then you can save and finish. If you want to change the mode, you can as well. So that shows up there. Then next it'll ask to identify a national data archive if your data are already located there. So like I mentioned earlier, if you have it at NCBI or NCEI, you can just select that here. So we'll know to kind of watch for that. And then we ask if the data are governed by IRB or HIPAA. So we do have social science data and things like that where we need to make sure the data are anonymized. So if that's the case, you would just select yes. If not, just provide no. And then last, if there's just any remarks about the data set we need to know, just write them here. And then you can either save and continue later if you need more information. You can reset the form if you want to start over, or you can save and submit to GRIIDC. So it'll give you this pop-up saying you successfully submitted it, and then it gives you the unique data set identifier. I apologize for another acronym. We call them UDs. They're just how we internally talk about your data sets. This is not the DOI, and you would not use this in any publication, but this is just for internal use. So you'll see this, and that'll be used to help you and I discuss your data set and track it. Okay, so you have submitted the diff to us, which is great. We'll return to PowerPoint. So once you have, we'll take a look at it. All I'm really looking for is aggregation of the data set. If you say we're collecting 10 years of data, then I'll say, okay, we need to figure out, make this smaller. How are you gonna, package this in a way that will meet your requirements for submitting the data for MBRACE? And if there's changes requested, usually we'll just do this via email, and I'll say, hey, did you mean to say this? Or I think this is better if we separate it into separate data sets. But generally, these are good to go. I'll approve them, and you'll get an email with that approval. So once the diff has been approved, I wanted to remind people that every data set has a landing page. So the landing page will be available for you to look at. It won't have much. It'll just have what you provided in the diff, but it is there. And this is where people will later download your data, and you'll have all the information for it. This is just an example of the URL. It's usually our main URL /data/ that unique data set identifier. So now we're going to talk about actually submitting the data. So you've created your account. You submitted the diff at the beginning before you've even collected your data. You've gone out now, you've collected all that data. So when do you submit it to us? Well, we like to tell people as soon as you have QA/QC'd it, it's good to go, it's not changing, you can go ahead and submit it to us. Now, you might say, oh, well, I'm still publishing on it. I'm not ready for it to be publicly available. That's fine. We do have a place in submission where you can set it to restricted, so nobody can download it. However, the sooner you get it to us, we do have other programs, other data coming in. This just gives us time to look at it, get it ready to go. And so it can go through our data curation process, be ready to go. It has the embargo on it, so no one can download it. However, when it's time, when your program mandates for it to be publicly available, we just have to push a button and it's done. So I don't want y'all to worry about that. If it's good to go ahead and submit it to us. And so the dates I were provided were, like I said, as soon as it's QA/QC'd. However, it has to be in 30 days before the end date of the subaward. But you will be receiving emails from Landry, I'm assuming, reminding you of this, and probably some project leads. So with your data also comes data documentation. Remember, we're trying to get it in a package where somebody else can actually understand it and use it. So we want to make sure those file names are descriptive. If you need README text files to say, this data set contains this, and these files are, this component of the project. If you have specific file naming conventions that you're like, I have to make these short, there's just too long. Here's my naming convention. This is what we do, so someone can understand it. Any equipment, experiment, information, just anything necessary for someone to use. And then any supplementary materials. And as a reminder, nothing published. So we don't want anything from a publication. So like I said already, it can be submitted to us or an approved national data repository. However, everything needs to be identified in our system. And if it is identified in our system, it will receive a DOI. So this is just another kind of reminder of that. You've completed the data, you've identified it, you can submit it via submission. If the data are completed at another repository, you still have to identify it with the diff, and you still have to submit the link via our dataset submission. So we'll just go ahead and show you what that looks like. We'll start at home again. And so under the Submit tab, we did the dataset information form at the beginning, we collected our data, and now we're ready to submit. All right, so you will see all the data sets, all the diffs that your project that you are associated with has collected. So we're gonna go to this one. So this was the diff you submitted a long time ago. Now we've collected the data and we're gonna update things. So the information we provided is here. The first is the dataset contact. And once again, anything with an asterisk is required, and then there's information buttons. So you can select another primary point of contact if you need to change it. If you need to add a contact, you can add another person and their information will display. You can add the role. So you can either be a point of contact, principal investigator, or author. And then down here, you'll actually provide an author list. So these are the people that would get credit if somebody used your data set. And then of course, here's the new funder field that we've added. So you can take a look at that, make sure that's still good to go. If you need to add another one here, you can. And you can navigate between the different tabs of information by the next and previous buttons at the bottom, or just by selecting these tabs. And anytime you select a tab, the information will save automatically, but you can also hit the save and continue later button if you need to come back to this, and you'll just return to submission, select that unique dataset identifier, and your information will come up. So this is information that we typically have to go back to the researcher about just to get more clarification and information describing the data set. So here we'll make sure that the information is really specific. So instead of summer, we'll put the actual dates of data collection here, and then the actual location. And then here's an abstract, very specific to what this data package is. Remember, it's not about the project, it's about someone looking at this and saying, do I want to download this or not? And so this has oyster recruitment data from these dates during this time at this area. So someone can see that and say, yep, I want to download this. And then a purpose, this is just a one sentence statement of why you collected this data. Parameters and units, this is the biggest one we kind of work on ourselves. And if we make any edits to this information, we send you an email at the end saying, we've completed your data set, here are the things we updated. And generally we just provide all the information, say it's a spreadsheet, we'll put all the column headers here, we'll put the units. So this is something that we need, we ask the researchers provide in this space, just kind of describing all of that information. So if there's no units in the spreadsheet, they definitely need to be provided here so someone could see what was actually going on. And then I mentioned earlier about methods. Please don't say see publication, just provide a brief description of your methods. And then after that brief description, you can say, for more detailed information, see this publication. And then if you want to provide information about instruments used, sampling scales and rates, error analyses, provenance and historical references, you can do that here. These fields aren't required, but if you have this information, please fill it in. And then next is keywords. Keywords obviously are used to help identify and find your data set later and search features. So anything that helps describe your data set, you type it in here and add it. If you want to remove it, you can. And then you can change the order here. Place keywords are used if your data set are spatial data. So if it's collected in a lab, we typically don't put place keywords, but say you're collecting in Mississippi, then we can add that there. And then topic category keywords are keywords that our metadata standard requires. So you give us all this information, and then we create standard ISO 19115-2. You don't have to remember that, metadata for your data set. And so this is just a standard keyword that's required from it. And if you hover over it, it gives you a brief definition. And you have to select at least one of those. Next is the data extent. So earlier we provided a polygon because we didn't really exactly know. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to know exactly where we collected the data now, right? So we have these specific data collection points. We can put them in here. You can copy and paste a list in. And so you type that in or paste it in. We can render it on a map. It'll ask if this is the right order. It is. And then you'll see the point displayed. So you can always change the mode. You can insert the text or draw on the map. You can still draw on the map if that's the best spatial feature for your data set. But if you have the specific coordinates, if you provide us an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the coordinates provided, which if it is spatial, you should be providing all of those coordinates within the spreadsheet, we'll go ahead and add those here if you've only provided a polygon, because we want the most specific data extent, which just helps enable search. Okay. So then we'll describe the time period. So if you collected it in the field, that's ground condition. If it's a modeled period, and sometimes data sets are both, and you would select that. So we'll select ground condition, and then this is the specific dates of collection. So if you went on a cruise and provided the cruise dates, but we saw your data set file is actually just 4 dates within that, we would just put those 4 dates. So just the specific dates to the actual data collection. So now that we've done all this, we can submit the data. Every tab of required fields has to be filled out before you can submit. So you'll see if we've done this and I clicked on something and we hadn't filled out a required field, you would not be able to submit the data. So this is just to ensure that we have all the descriptive information before. So this is our file transfer area. It's very simple. You can upload a file or even a folder now. So in the past, we could only accept a single file. It was very frustrating for many, I'm sure, but now you can upload single files, single folders, and kind of edit it within here. If you have a large file, you will have to configure your account for SFTP, and then we will work with you on how to ingest the larger data. So this is something that if you have a larger data set, later on in the process, when you're ready, you can contact us and we can kind of walk you through how to do that. And then over here is the enter URL. And this was where I was mentioning if the data were remotely hosted somewhere else at a national data repository that we would have to approve, you can provide the DOI URL of that repo here. So we'll go ahead and upload a single file. Okay, we'll just do that. And you can see it here. And you can rename it, you can delete it, you can move it to another folder if you have another folder. So you can work within this to organize your files. I suggest you do it before, but just in case you don't, you see something last minute, you can do it here. So we have our data set uploaded, we're good to go. And then the last thing that I mentioned earlier, you've given it to us, but you're not ready. The publication hasn't come out. We've got plenty of time before your deadline. You can go ahead and put that restricted data set there. So that will embargo it. We can go ahead and curate it, get it ready to go, and then it still won't be publicly available until we talk with you about it and we unrestrict it. So then you'll submit your data set to us, and you'll get this confirmation. It gives you the unique data set identifier, the information. You'll have the DOI here. We just don't have it on our demo site, but that is the first time you'll see your DOI when you submit the data to us. So it'll be there, it'll be in your email, and it'll also be on your datasets landing page. So here's an example of a dataset landing page. It has the title and the abstract, your spatial extent, the project's information, contact, data collection, theme keywords. And then this is a really important thing, the suggested citation, so that when somebody sees this and uses your data, they can cite you with this suggested citation. And then it'll have just all the basic metadata information so someone can kind of quickly glance and see if they want to download it. And later it'll have the download information, but because this just got submitted, it's not ready for download yet. Okay, returning to the PowerPoint. Like I mentioned, we take a look at every data package. We are not QA/QCing your data. That is not what we do. We're just making sure that we can open files. We're making sure that the data are well described. There's no copyright materials in there. The description is complete and accurate. So say someone says, we collected fish data, but you didn't, we'll remove that, just things like that. So we will be in contact with you if we have questions about it. Just please respond in a timely manner. Even if you don't have the information, say, I don't have this right now. We'll follow up with you just so we don't sit on it for a while, you know, with data. As you know, the longer you kind of wait on things is more prone to losing information. So we just kind of want to get things wrapped up. So yeah, that's just kind of how our process goes. Once we have everything we need, we'll finalize it, and you'll get an email from us with any changes we made to the descriptive information, any improvements, and then just letting you know that it's ready to go. And of course, you get the DOI, like I told you, it displays on the landing page, and it helps you cite them, helps other people cite them. We want to promote the best practice of citing them in the actual references list like you would a publication, instead of just acknowledgements. It should be treated like a product, like a publication. So that's just something we kind of remind people. And then once again, that suggested citation is on the landing page. So we have additional resources. The help tab has the account request, password information, FAQs, training and user guides, other webinar recordings. And then if you have any questions, you can contact me here. I also wanted to show you our dataset monitoring page. If we go home here, on the top, there's tracking and stats and dataset monitoring. And this is just a helpful tool. It has all the projects on the side, MBRACE 2. And so you can see all the data sets for all of MBRACE 2 within each project and their status. So these have been curated and it's restricted for download. This one's been submitted. These are publicly available. So you can see kind of what if you hover over the things, it shows you what it means. So this is just a helpful tool to see, say you're working on a project and you have something similar and you're saying, someone said to submit the data, but I don't know if somebody else already did. You can take a look at this and see. And also helps with consistencies of titles. You can see if somebody, you know, used this title already, you can kind of use something similar. So anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you can always contact me. We're here to help. We're here to make this as easy and painless as possible. So for this first step of getting the dataset information submitted, if you have any additional questions about that with your specific project, just contact me and I can work with you to figure out how best to divvy them up into datasets. And with that, I'll just open it up for any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any.
This is Landry.
Hi, Landry.
If I could just make a few comments.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you for doing the presentation. And some of y'all heard this last time, but You know, the way we get our money is under the Restore Act. You know, Treasury is the person that gets the money. They in turn give the money to DEQ, and Department of Environmental Quality for Mississippi then provides MBRACE the funding. So if I go back to Treasury, as you know, Treasury is not one of these, is not a group that normally puts out research grants. So, but one of the things, Treasury got involved after the fact with the GRIIDC program that Rosalie mentioned. It was, you know, it was the $500 million 10-year program. Mainly the first 5 years is 7 years, I think they did a lot of collection. And then the last 2 to 3 years, they were more into synthesis. You know, we collected a lot of data. Let's try to reuse the data and do synthesis. Well, Treasury, from that experience, I guess they came away where collecting data is expensive. So if it's the one thing they remember about the research is, like I said, collecting data is expensive. So to be good stewards of the taxpayer, well, this is not necessarily taxpayers' money, but to be good stewards of the money, then they want to make sure the data is saved. So in the early days, we had a choice of going with GRIIDC or to one of the national NOAA centers to store data. But the advantage for GRIIDC is they store a lot of the different parameters, whereas the NOAA centers, you know, they had to break up your data. Some parameters would go into one center, some would go into another center. Back in those days when we first got started, the centers would accept your data for free. Then you'd find out 2 years later you wanted to get a copy of your data set and they would want to charge you for it. So anyway, so we do use GRIIDC, and it's important, you know, that you get your data. It's pretty easy for the competitive people. You know, roughly last time it was 30 days before the end of the contract. We feel like you're not collecting any more data by then. You should be able to close that out before the end of the contract. We still, I think, internal to, you know, to MBRACE, we're going to have to talk about the delivery of the core data. Do we really want to wait 5 years, or do you really want to wait 5 years before you submit data? So we still have to have that discussion if we wanted to get some of those data sets earlier, since that project is a 5-year project. So that's all I wanted to say. Appreciate in the past. At last, you know, the last round, both core and competitive, we did get all of the data into GRIIDC. Some of it is still being evaluated, but we did at least get all of the data into the system. So thank you all for your past submissions, and looking forward to getting more data into the system. That's all I have.
Thanks, Landry. And that, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I do want to say this has been a really great group to work with, and we appreciate everyone's efforts in getting the data in on time. We haven't always had that. It's usually a struggle. So this has been a really nice, easy working group. I see a hand up.
Hi, yes. So Rosalie, I have a postdoc, Eric, and he's in charge of uploading the data. And I have an account, and I guess he will need to create an account for himself, right? Then we can share the same.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Accounts should not be shared. So, you know, like a lot of other systems, we want to promote security within this. And so if somebody else is going to be submitting a data set, say a student, they will need to create an account and have their own login and password.
But then we can look at the same data upload.
Yes, so like I showed, all of the data sets within a specific project, researchers that are under that project will be able to view all of them. They'll be able to edit them and submit them. So if I put him under that same project, he'll be able to see everything you see.
Okay. So for the project, you already create the project, or we need to create the project?
I've already created it. Unfortunately, on our demo site, the data wasn't refreshed, so you didn't see it. But I already got the information. So all the
Okay.
MBRACE 3 projects, if you go to that dataset monitoring page, you'll see them listed there. So if you want to take a look and see if there's any issues with it, I missed a word or whatever, just let me know and I can fix that. But yes, I've already put in the new MBRACE 3 projects. The PIs will be listed underneath each one under leadership. So check that information. And then I have people associated with that you won't see. However, if you're submitting a data set and you're looking through the people and you don't see somebody that should be on there, just send me a quick email. I'll email them. You can refresh the diff and it'll show up. So
Okay.
that's all the stuff
Okay.
I have to enter because it changes all the time as new funding cycles come through.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
I have.
Hi.
Hey, my name is Vitor. Nice to meet you. And
Nice to meet
very
you.
good presentation. Was very easy to follow. And as you said, it doesn't look scary as should. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So question. So the same situation will happen once I get my postdoc here. I will send an email to include the person, and they can manage that. He or she can manage that.
Yep.
So one example, let's say someone go to the field, collect basic information such as wind speed, air temperature, clear sky conditions. When you submit the data, because you have multiple variables in different units, do you prefer to submit each information in a single spreadsheet, or just create different tabs for metadata? And if I collect with sensors together during the same day and the same time, create a new tab and include that. And when I describe, I go and each variable I describe the units, or I submit a single spreadsheet with a single variable. How this looks like for you?
It just depends on what you think would be helpful for a user to see as well. Definitely having a sheet with metadata, a worksheet in the Excel spreadsheet with metadata is lovely to see. We don't see it often. It's great. That's always helpful to say, hey, the following sheets are going to have this information, even if you just have one sheet. So it's up to you if you want to put all of that information in one sheet, or if it would be easier for someone to look at in multiple worksheets. As long as it's defined somewhere, if we don't see it in the actual data file, we'll make sure that the information is in the metadata, but it really should be within the data file. It's helpful to have that information right where the data is. So I think always having that separate worksheet of metadata is helpful. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
I think, yeah, good point. So I can make one sheet explaining the variables, and the others just come with the data for that field campaign.
Yeah, as long as there's the headers with, the identifiers of what's in there. And then you can put the units maybe in that metadata sheet at the beginning. But as long as the column is described, so we know what's exactly there, even if it's just an acronym, but then in that first sheet, you define what that acronym is, that's helpful. We just need it somewhere within the data file.
Makes sense. And my last question will be, since I have bi-monthly field data collection, do I need to set up all this along the entire project, or just I can do 1 year? Or
I would think a year would be fine. I feel like monthly might be overkill. And once again, this is thinking about someone who wants to use the data. I don't think it would be, even if they wanted 1 month, they could still download one data set that had a year's worth to get the month. It wouldn't be that tricky. Does that make sense? I think year would be a good. If it was a lot of variables within each month, then maybe separate by month. But it seems like you could do it with a year.
So that's a good point too. And let me rephrase. My plan will be bi-monthly.
Okay.
On this time to submit my plan, do I need to do the entire project plan, or can I do let's say I right now I have a field work in January. I submit that right now for you, and also March. And as I go along the project, I keep submitting the new and creating the new plans, or do I need to do the entire 2 years right now?
I would suggest
until
doing
August
it
31.
now, rather than later. So you kind of have it, this is what we're doing, and then we can later track it. And it seems like it might be a lot right now, but it might be easier later if you kind of have it now, and then later we can say, oh, you're missing a month, or, you know, something like that. But that's a good point. Diffs can be created at any point. They need to be, even if you have a data set you forgot about and you're like, oh, I have the data, but I forgot to submit a diff. You still have to do that first step of submitting the diff, and you can do that later on. I think for this beginning part, we're just trying to get an idea of what your plan is. And it might change, and that's okay. If you don't use a diff, we can delete it. It's as easy as that.
Okay.
But I would say try to put in as many as possible now of what you think you're going to do. And I would do it by year. And if for some reason later on we discover that might not be the best way, we can always go back. We can remove them. We can spit new ones. This is just kind of the start, a general plan.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So Rosa, I just log on to my account at the GRIIC. I see my name already linked to the MBRACE 3, but I don't see my previous project. So that's by design, right? I just see my ongoing project.
You should see all of them.
No, once I get in,
Okay.
I don't see. I only see my current
On what?
MBRACE 3.
On the diff?
No, I just log in. Then once I log in, I only see my current MBRACE 3, which I haven't submitted anything yet.
Are you looking at the monitoring? What page are you on?
I don't know. I just log in. What that should be the page. I just log in that page.
If you go
Oh
to...
yeah, I just log in. Then what I only see is this overview, data set, people, publication, information on the left panel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you
that's I log in, that's all I get. I don't see any.
When you go submit your diff, you'll see all three there. And then when you submit your data, you should see all of them on there as well.
But I already submit previous MBRACE 2. Once I log in, I don't see.
So when you do the new one, you'll just select 3.
Okay.
So that's a good point too. If you see your previous, make sure you're selecting the correct funding cycle if you were associated with previous funding cycles. But you'll do that in the diff, and that's why we kind of take a look at them to approve them. If you have 2, I'll follow up with you and say, did you mean is this for 2 or 3? Because I know we're still kind of finalizing 2, so there may be some overlap there, and I can work with you on that.
Okay.
Say, Zidong, this is Landry. I can stop by maybe. You know it's gonna be bad if I'm gonna try to help you, but my screen,
okay.
When I'm looking at my screen on the left-hand side, I see MBRACE 1, I see MBRACE 2, and then I see where they set up MBRACE 3.
I don't see that. That's something
right.
Let me show you on our monitoring. I'll show everybody. So if you go to the home page, dataset monitoring.
Yeah.
And then you'll see here all 3. So if you select on 3, you'll see I have all the new projects set up in here.
Yeah.
There's no data yet, of course. And then with the source and then the PI's name should be there.
Yeah, I know that. I see everything. Yeah, I see. But just when I log on, I guess I guess question is my expectations that when I log on, I was expecting to see all the data I have submitted, but I guess
when you log into the site, it's just gonna, I don't know where it takes you exactly, but it might just be a generic page, or you'll have to still navigate to where you want to go. So if you want to view everything, you can do monitoring, then you can go to diff and see all your projects there.
Okay, yeah.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, well, if not, I just wanted to thank everyone for your time. If you have any questions, just send me an email. I'm here to help make it as easy and painless as possible. And once again, reminder that the diff is due August 31st. And don't be scared by it. Put in what you think you're going to collect. And then if you need to add more later or delete them later, that's fine too. We can work with you on that. All right. Well, nice seeing and meeting everyone. And I'll talk to you
Thank you.
guys later. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.